Buenos días.
Good morning. We're going to continue with today's activities for Animation 2023, the Day of Animation 2023. We have Raúl García, who's going to talk to us about the world of Storyboard. It's a pleasure to introduce him because not only is he a great professional, but a great friend. As a producer, I was lucky enough to produce his first film. And Días de Cine has done a special program of Walt Disney, and we're both together in a TV show. So that's great. I hope you enjoy Raúl's talk. Thank you.
A ver, vale, parece que...
Perfect. It seems it's working. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for this day of animation, and thank you for coming to this talk. This is going to be a bit informal, and if at some point you have any questions, please do tell me, and if not, we'll have some time at the end for questions and answers. Technology. My name is Raúl García, and my life in animation is quite large. I've been working in animation for 35 years or so, more specializing more in feature films, but lately in all types of animation projects, really. The truth is I started as an animator. So my background is a 2D animator, traditional, pencil and paper animator. But gradually in my career, as I moved forward, or as I went into, animation supervision, and then I had to face this world of storyboards, which is the topic we're going to discuss here now. I worked as an animator in Walt Disney for 10 years, and it was not just a great work experience, but also an educational experience, given that I was given the opportunity to explore in depth the 70 years of history of the Walt Disney Studios, and I was able to access original animation, cartoons, feature films, storyboards. The reason for talking about storyboards is because on the one hand, when you work on a storyboard, well, I've had a lot of experience in many projects when you move into directing films. And also because as a teacher, I did master lessons across the globe, and I go to the College of the Art in Singapore as a lecturer. And I always found that in all the animation projects of all the students, there's always a lack of understanding that the storyboard is the foundation of a film. And that's why we need to explain a bit the process. And that's also why I decided to publish a book called The Manual of a Storyboard Artist, where I try to make clear certain concepts that I thought were clear, but when you talk to someone who wants to work on animation or even in real images, they don't know a lot about storyboards, so it's interesting to explore this a bit. So a storyboard is the skeleton that articulates the production, any type of feature production. And for real image cinema, for animation cinema, for cartoons, for television animation even, it can be used for large events such as pop concerts, for the Taylor Swift or Shakira's concert, or the inaugurations of large events like the Olympics. All of that can be visualized firsthand with the use of storyboards. So a storyboard is a type of cartoons, vignettes that tell a story. And in that sense, I would like to demystify that idea that the animation is really expensive, complicated. It's true that whatever the process is in terms of audiovisual creation, whether real cinema or animation, or real image cinema or animation, is the animation, the storyboard will allow us, in any case, to be able to visualize what we want to talk about. And with a storyboard, well, the storyboard is a communication channel. The director can communicate with the rest of the team that's going to work in the film.
And right now I'm not differentiating between real image and animation. As a matter of fact, lately in this world we live in, and where frontiers between real image and animation are quite diluted, well, storyboard is really important when you're planning your real image movie. Something that was not as used previously, but now that we're talking about virtual settings and we're talking about the assistance of CGI, you know, computer generated images, well, this storyboard is a basic tool so that cinematographers can talk to DOPs, with actors, with special effects teams, and so on.
De nuevo, el storyboard es una herramienta importante.
So it's a tool that is used for any sort of narrative technique. So there are differences for real-time images and animation storyboards. When we're talking about cinema, there are certain elements that have to be communicated and that make the DOP's life easier, or actors even. So storyboard for cinema has to take into account how you prepare a shot, the camera angle, the camera movement, the size of the character, and technical aspects, as well as special effects. So these things are common to animation storyboards, but in the movies, in cinema, real image cinema, everything has to be prepared beforehand. So everything that has to do with decor, characters and so on exists already. So the cinematographer has to create a certain choreography for the scene, for the sequence. They have to work together with a DOP, and they need to have this cinematography narration or storytelling, and in the end of the process they have to know how to do the montage, and it has to do with the structure of the movie itself, and the final product will be created in the editing room. So they will choose the best parts of each sequence, but an animation, the final product of the movie, is actually created during the storyboard. So we are editing the movie when creating the storyboard, and everything that exists in an animation movie has had to be pre-designed and pre-configured. So there's no randomness to it. Everything that's there is there because we created it on purpose. So we are perfect candidates to manipulate the audience, and manipulate the audience by directing their attention to where we want them to look at. So that's really important when we compare it to real image storyboards, or when you take your camera, you put it here, and there's always a wire that shouldn't be there, or the grandmother that's walking her dog and will interrupt that shot, or a composition that doesn't quite work because a plane has flown by. So there are lots of different problems when you're dealing with real image. But in animation, we can compose the image in a perfect way and without any sort of problems such as the ones I just mentioned. There is a direct relationship, very direct relationship between storyboard and production. Once again, we need to understand that we're developing a feature film, or that is art and industry as well. So the budget for the movie has to be taken into account when you're creating your storyboard, and the other way around. The storyboard actually allows you to better consider all the problems that you might be facing later on when you're making your movie. And the most obvious case is, for instance, when you're preparing for special effects. Here I have gotten an example from Blade Runner. And obviously with this way of visualizing the movie with this storyboard, producers can sit together and say, well, the first vignette, the first step in the story is Los Angeles 2024. We have a 360-degree or a panoramic scene, and you see one of those chimneys with fire coming out of them. So you could think about that. You can do that with a model. You could do it with matte painting. You can do it in CGI. The fire can be generated with particles, or we can do it somewhere else and then put it back in. So all of that will have an impact on our budget. Now the second panel, we see Decker's ship in Tiro building, and maybe that shot is too complicated because you have to build the facade of the building and there is a camera movement to it, so maybe the budget will not cover that, and what we do is we will set a camera and we will have some fire coming out here, and the shape will be a 3D model or will be created using CGI. So that sort of those sorts of considerations are important when you're creating your storyboard. So once again, if you're thinking about the CGI of a battle between two armies, obviously if you have all the money in the world, then you could have a wonderful general shot with 400 horses running this way, 500 horses running that way, and that clash in the middle of the scene, and you have a great battle. But if the budget is limited, in this phase you can think, well, we will have in the forefront a warrior with his shield that will cover half of the screen, and then behind that warrior we'll have 2 to 3 warriors running, and then we'll have noise and a group of horses that will not be 400 or 500. So in real image you have to really plan your storyboard. It's really important in order to save money, in order to consider this sort of production. So storyboards are not something that we have invented. Historically, here you have some storyboards or the planning that was done for Alexander Nevsky's movie. We're talking about a movie that was filmed in the 20s, 30s, 1920s, 30s, and this was a cinematographer that created his movies in a way that each frame looked like a painting, and he used the lights and shadows in a masterly way. And the cinematographer, when he filmed, he did do his own sketches. 38 sketches. Okay, thank you. I'm sorry. So he had his little sketches, so that he could somehow communicate the DOP what he wanted. This is what I want. This is a composition that we're going to use. And I imagine that in these cases there are many things that were filmed in decors. I mean, these were sets that had been created by the art department, and you know, the art department and prop department knew what was the part that was going to be seen, so what they could create, what they should paint, and so on. So the storyboard in this case is a tool, a communication tool, an amazing communication tool. Now the most famous case of storyboard use in the movies is something that we see with Hitchcock. Hitchcock planned his movies quite carefully and in a meticulous way. And in this case, we have here the famous shower scene in Psycho, Alfred Hitchcock's movie, that was created by Saul Bass, an amazing designer, a genius in his field, and he collaborated in logo design and credit design, and in this case Hitchcock hired him for him to design the shower scene. If you watch it on the movies in the screen, it has an amazing rhythm. It's the scariest scene in the story of the movies, and it required a very careful planning due to different reasons. And one of the reasons was that it needed to create that tension, that Janet Leigh tension. And then there was the problem of censorship, because in the 60s there was amazing censorship. They had very rigorous rules, and here they were dealing with a protagonist who was naked in the shower, and you needed to really be very careful with what you showed on screen. So thanks to this storyboard, Hitchcock could create this scene, this sequence, that is almost the same thing as what had been designed. So this is the most famous example of the use of storyboards in real image feature films. Now, obviously, one of the things that we need to take into account when we are creating a storyboard is that we are actually kind of facing a white canvas that we need to fill. So the composition of the image is vital when we're thinking about how to tell the story, how we're going to put all the elements that will provide the spectator with the information so that the spectator may understand what is going on. And in this case, the format, the screen format, is really important because it makes us think of the amount of elements that need to be there so that we get the right composition. And that obviously has an impact on the storytelling. So my composition was 133. It was a square one, but then years have gone by and the format has been changing. It's grown larger and larger. With the arrival of television, then we had very panoramic formats with Panavision and so on. So 235, as you can see on top. And lately, the format we have considered as standard is, just a second, is this one here, 185, which is digital format, the one that we usually use in TV and the movies. And obviously, you have IMAX formats and so on, but in general, it's something that we need to take into account. Now, real image compared to animation, what are the differences in storyboard? Well, obviously, there are elements such as planning, composition, lighting, contrast, perspective, internal movement in the shot and camera movements. All of that is common to both medium. Now, in the case of real image, all of these movements are defined in the storyboard with arrows, but with animation we tend to have a more full planning where you will draw the camera movement or you indicate it with different elements. Now, things such as acting, continuity and choreography and action, those four elements in real image storyboards are not considered as much, mainly because the directing a real image feature requires conversation with the actors, and the choreography is usually set with cameramen and women, and the work of the team is decided at the set with the cinematographer working with the whole team. But in animation, the storyboard is a communication tool, but it's also a tool that helps us storytell. And it helps make life easier for everyone who's coming afterwards, because you know that animation is teamwork, and each team will work on the work that was carried out by the previous team. So acting and continuity are decided at the storyboard level to just make sure that everything flows right and everyone understands what is going on. in the movie. So somehow the storyboard in the animation has to have the participation of animators who will tell you what the character is actually doing. Obviously, going back to our classics, it's amazing, but the first studio that used storyboards in their productions was Disney. So here you have the storyboard. It's a bit rough, the one for Steamboat Willie, and here Disney uses this rough format, but that gives some continuity and a beginning, a development and conclusion of this short film that Disney created with Mickey Mouse. So before Disney, storyboards weren't really being used. Before Disney, for instance, Felix the Cat. Well, Pat Sullivan would just sit with the animators and they would say, well, the movie we're going to make is Felix in the circus. So the animators would go to their cubicles and they would draw gags with Felix at the circus, and then they would add everything up, and that would make 7 minutes, which would be the short movie. So there wasn't really an element that would unify everything, something that would give a clear cinematography storytelling, cinematographic storytelling with a beginning, a development, and a clear end. And Disney was the first one that realized that they needed to organize all of that material, all of that graphic material. And Steamboat Willie was the first one that used that system. Now people, such as the ones working for the Warner Bros. Studios, would use storyboard as a script writing. So when you see here on top, directed by Freeling and then story by Ted Pierce, that's actually the script. So when Ted Pierce would write his script for Looney Tunes, for Warner Brothers, he would write visually. There wasn't really a written script. It was just this sort of storyboards. These are the panels that he would draw to explain the gags, and that would go straight to production and the whole process. So the storyboard was completely visual.
La industria, ¿no?
This was lost in the industry, and somehow it has come back with Felucci, for instance, or SquarePants SpongeBob, where we have gone back to the system where storyboard is created by the script writers. I mean, actually the script is created by storyboard illustrators who, based on a premise, will develop the whole short film. And this is something that has been developed lately. On the other hand, the other system, which is working with a storyboard and working with a script, where the artist will illustrate that script, is another option. So there are two different ways of working on the storyboard. One is using the storyboard as the basis, and the other is using the script as a basis. So the story is written and then you illustrate it. There are other artists who would draw the storyboards, and this is something that was done in the 40s, for instance, and that was lost a bit due to the structure of the studio. Here you have an example with Chuck Jones. He would draw his own storyboards, and currently that happens in the anime industry in Japan. The director of the movie is usually the person who draws the whole storyboard. Miyazaki's movies are drawn by Miyazaki, so the whole storyboard has been done by Miyazaki on his own without a team. But in the In the rest of the world, the industry is different, and the storyboard is an element that is created by a department, which is the storyboard department, and the artist will bring to life the story or the script together with the script writer, the cinematographer, or so on. Now there are, storyboards are so important when telling a story that, especially in television, before you produce an episode, before you produce a series, you will have to create production bibles, and within those production bibles, you provide a guide of how the storyboard needs to be drawn. So here we're seeing the production bible for The Simpsons. And once again, if we look at the story, if we look at The Simpsons story, it's 35 years doing this television series. If we get one episode from last week and an episode from 20 years ago, the way of telling the story is more or less the same. So The Simpsons have their own rules, their storytelling canon, and their standard, and that standard has been established at the beginning when the series was created, telling exactly what can be done, what cannot be done, what sort of shots can be done, what shots cannot be done. So in that sense, storyboards are also useful to establish those patterns. When we see on television, when we watch a series on television and then suddenly the series is catalogued as a pilot, for instance, you're going to watch the pilot episode. It's not just the first episode of a series. The pilot is the one that will give you the way in which all of the other episodes are going to be told. So it's really important to establish the rules of the game. And those rules of the game are presented by the storyboard department. So it's really interesting because it's another function, a function that we didn't really had in mind. We didn't know that it existed. So it's really important to create a production bible for the future. So obviously that happens more in television series than in the movie. In the movies it's completely different. So all of these stories that I'm telling you here have been tackled in this book that I have written, that is the Artist Manual for Storyboards, where I break down all of the important concepts when you are creating your own storyboard. And these are basic concepts that go from the function of a storyboard when storytelling to talking about cinematography and concepts, cinematographic concepts and things that we need to know, because in the end we are dealing with storytelling. We are telling a story to the audience, and then factors that are, I'd say, more interesting when drawing a storyboard, such as composition, perspective, and the visual elements that make that storyboard up. Now, when we talk about storyboard, we're not just talking about the little drawings, we're not just talking about the graphic material, we're not just talking about what is drawn or what is told. We're also talking about all of the information that a storyboard needs to provide so that the whole team that will come later may understand that information and could then use that information in all of the different elements that are needed for an animation movie to be produced. So I'm talking about basic concepts such as the name of the production or the episode number, the page number, and then within the storyboard panel you have to indicate what's the dialogue, what's the action, then notes if there is special effects, and then simple things such as saying here what is the number of frames that the movie has, or what's the shot, and here we indicate the shadows or lights that we are going to see in that shot. That is also something that we will need when working with an animation. So what's the thing here? Once again, in the process of storyboard creation, we're talking about a storytelling process, so we need to know what the cinematographic language is. Here you have an example of storyboard with Santa Maria, one of my movies, which is The Fall of the Usher House. And here we're exploring a general shot, then so you have the forefront, detail, so on. So these are the different shots that explain what is the perspective, a different piece of information regarding the story that we need to tell. So when we are doing a movie, the shots are not going to be, well, here I have a large shot, and this one is forefront, and so on. So this is the general shot, and this is the tension between these two characters. So as we get closer, when we have this close-up, we get into his personality. So when we get to the detail, this is the mind of the character. We're exploring what the character is feeling at the time. So if we continue with this idea of exploring the different shots, here the camera movements, if it were real image, we would explore it with arrows or by writing what would happen. In animation, we try to draw as much as we can. I'm sorry, I went to the next one and I cannot go back. So here we have camera movements, and we try to explain them as easily as possible, because once again, the storyboard is then going to be given to the layout department, where they're going to explore what sort of elements are going to be used to create that shot, so that works, that movement works, and then it will be taken to the camera department, where they are going to see how they can technically have those movements take place. So it is an information process here. You have to give them all of the information. So when you're considering the storyboard, obviously you have to consider storytelling. I mean, it's cinema storytelling. And in this case, the rule of 180 degrees is important, because what's important here is to give clarity or to shed light on what you're explaining. So at all times, the spectator must not feel lost in this storytelling process. It needs to be like a Michael Bay movie, so that they really know what is going on and where it's happening. So in this case, this is your typical story where when two characters establish a relationship and they talk to each other, we have an imaginary line that goes from one character to the other, and the camera has always to be at one side of that line and not opposite. So when the camera goes to the other line, then there is a strange movement that breaks that continuity. So in that case, it's clear. For instance, we have this character and that character, and cameras A, B, and C are the good ones, and camera D, which is the one that's there, does not work. So if you go from B to D, it seems that the characters have changed their position. But any composition using B, C, A, C, B, etc., all of those work very well, and at all times the audience knows who is talking, when they're talking, and what geographical spaces they stand. And same thing can be said about having a dialogue scene. When you have a dialogue scene, you have the different shots, and usually, so the first camera would be this angle, this would be this other angle, and then you have internal shots here and there, and this allows us to see what the shot and reverse shot are, and you're planning the space for each character. So each character occupies a certain space, and in this case we're using a proportion law where each character is set, and it doesn't matter if we change the shot. Each character respects that proportion. You have three parts, so they have to use the same amounts of the screen depending on the shot. So these are things that are they're laws, cinema laws. They're not specific to animation. They're just for cinema in general. And something that's also important is to play in a subliminal way with your audience. Your storyboard is like an exercise, a basic manipulation exercise. And what we do is we use all these subliminal elements to give that feeling in storytelling. So in this case, the idea is to see this character that is threatening this other character. So that would be the general idea, right? If we want to emphasize that threat, we can use perspective, and we can see that the lines are merging into this character, and even the lighting. So once we establish that, it's as though we were creating an imaginary line in the middle of the screen. So this side belongs to the bully, and this other side belongs to the one being bullied. So if we want to create a scene where the bully is really eating up with, say, the little character, then that character needs to invade the half belonging to the one being bullied. So if you see the succession here, you see that it's becoming quite threatening. He's being smothered because he is invading his space. So this manipulation of the space works to create tension, to create what you're trying to tell.
De nuevo,
Once again, the composition on the storyboard is key. Why? Because, as we have said, we manipulate space. We're innate manipulators of the space. And with a storyboard and composition, we're able to guide the eye of the spectator to the specific place we want them to look at. So, basic rules, such as the Aurea rule in this case, works really well in order to create that flow, that visual flow. If we start up here, wait one sec, up here, this handrail takes us to the foot, to the suitcase, and the focus of action, which are these two characters that are walking up into this mansion. So there's a flow, a visual flow. The eye comes in through this side, goes through our friend Rodri, that is very much focused on putting down some nails on Madeleine's grave. So you see that it goes like this and it flows. So here, for instance, we have the presentation, the more iconic presentation of the film, if you remember. Well, the usher's house and the character, and this branch here takes us to this other branch from here or to the trunk of the tree, from there to the horse, and the horse to the house. So these are tricks, things that you do it without realizing. Other times you do it intentionally. That composition is vital. So that point of view all types of lines, geometrical lines, are very effective when planning, guiding the spectator to the focus of attention, where the spectator is going to take that information and keep it in his or her brain, so that before or after can also make up the film, make up their own film. And from a technical perspective, in terms of production, this gives us a lot of information about things we need to bear in mind when looking and doing the shots. Another important thing is the geography. Where are the characters and the direction towards they're going towards? It seems very simplistic, but when you think about doing a storyboard, about anything. Normally, you do a map of where things take place in order to know constantly what things are going to come up and in which direction we're going. In this case, this is a series of shots of another one of my favorite films, The Mask of the Red Death, where we have, well, there's a carriage that goes to the castle, then you go inside the castle, and then you go via the different rooms in order to keep the flow, in order to make sure that the character goes from A to B. It's very important to have a map because it allows you to choose the type of camera and the flow of the images of where they're going. I will give you the key, the visual key to where you're going and where the character is. Storyboard artists and DreamWorks used to say that they are used, normally every 2 shots they have to put an establishing shot, a general shot, to show where the characters are, so the spectator is not lost in space. Once again, when we look at a storyboard, obviously the script is key, it's very important. And in the script, if the script is well written, it also gives you some ideas about what you need to do and how you must draw. However, doing a storyboard, you don't normally start working like this, big. It's not like you're gonna put a huge board in your room. No, you start making small drawings like the size of a stamp, where you can indicate with positions different shots, seeing if it works or not, and on that, based on that, you build your own narrative. I think that there are different types of storyboard, and when you have to look into a feature film or a narrative, you don't start by developing all the storyboard at once, first, second, third shot. No, you start with what we called a bit board. So once you've seen the type of the section of the script you want to illustrate, you think about what are the minimum of panels I can write so that someone who doesn't know the sequence perfectly understands what happens in that section of the script. And when we talk about feature films, this is what happens when you write a feature film and you want to start doing pitches, making a Bible, moving it around. What you do is a bit board, 15, 20 images of different moments during the feature film that explain what's happening, so that with a minimum amount of images you can tell the story of the film, but then obviously visually so much more interesting than if you start just talking to them. So this is a clear example. This is a TV series that I did a while back, and the premise for the series was that this gentleman here, this one, finds a magic lamp with a genie, and the genie makes the life everything possible. It can make anything possible. So here, him and his wife are in counseling. She complains that her husband is telling her that he has a genie, and she doesn't believe him. And the woman and the therapist, the woman goes and the therapist says, "Is it true that you have a genie?" And he shows him the genie. So the bit board will be these 3 panels where we explain the action. Once you have the bit board, you start developing the action with the script. So in this case, this would be the production storyboard, where you have the different elements to understand what's going to happen. So he complains that she doesn't understand him. She complains that he's crazy. She has to be absent for a minute because of certain things, and when she leaves, the therapist says, "Is that real? And can you show me the genie?" So these are this production storyboards of production, where he thinks yes or no, I like it or I don't like it. And then there's the animatics. Basically, this is a storyboard as a succession of drawings, yes. But for production, what you need is not just a sequence of drawings, but you need to give it some time and mix it with voices and with sound. And the storyboard is narrated in the space and with the sound, and then there's animatics. So when you move on to animatics, you normally tend to add more panels to the storyboard, because these animatics will set the grounds for the production, layout, departments, etc., about how it's going to be created, the story. So in this case, when the storyboard goes to animatics, we have to add much more to understand or to explain what we're doing. So for instance, the genie appears and there's a puff of smoke, or here she leaves through this door, etc., and all the things that happen around. And this is normally very common in storyboards for TV stations. In fact, when I work for The Simpsons, looking at the animatics of The Simpsons, I could see a storyboard every 8 shots, which means that the film comes out from the animatics department nearly animated. And this is very common when the animation production has to be done in a different country. For instance, a country that may be culturally different to yours, and they may not speak English or the language in which the storyboard was done. So you have to give as much information as possible so that there are no misunderstandings, misinterpretations, so that no one misinterprets things. Once again, we go quickly over this. In the end, there are 2 types of storyboard in the industry. The one based on the story and the one based on the script. They are very different. Disney, up to the 80s at least, always used the storyboard based on the story. The story that was going to be narrated was built on storyboards, and we had some schemes, first scene, second scene, third scene, etc. But then the artist would create those sequences, develop them, and Disney, Redderman, or whoever was the director would guide them, telling them what was going to be used and what wasn't. And then there was like a script writer who would transcribe what you could see visually in the panels with the dialogue in order to actually write the script. And I think this worked in Disney up to the Beauty and the Beast. After the Beauty and the Beast, there was a more specific structure of the script. But it could change at any time. In Aladdin, it was quite clear how it was going to work until Robbie Williams came into the recording room. And when he read the lines of the genie, started improvising and moving away from the script, so much so that the movie took another path because of the cleverness of his changes. So, but normally they tend to be based more on the story than on the script. Other types of films, such as Paragon of Rogers in Paris, or the ones that were moved from the TV station to a film, were based on a script. The script is written and the storyboard has to illustrate the script. It has no room for flexibility. In TV this is more clear. For instance, Adult Swing or adult animation series where the script is the protagonist. Or for instance, when you start a TV series, maybe there's already a production Bible with how the storyboard has to follow, all the backgrounds, all the characters, etc., etc. And the function of the storyboard is to present that without moving out too much. In DreamWorks also happens when they start doing the storyboard of a film, the backgrounds haven't been designed, not all the characters either, the structure is not clear. And that means that the cinema production is more complex, because really you don't start with a strict script.
Luego obviamente dentro de...
And then,
dentro de lo que es un guión.
this is a script for a feature film, okay, but there are different types of storyboards. You start with visual explorations, you look for the type of, for instance, the feature film you're going to do. So in these visual explorations allow you to visualize the world. Let's say there's dragons in it. And or the illustrated script, using the script to creating an illustration to talk about a narration, or the presentation storyboard. But it's to sell it. When you're going to do a new series, and the normal thing is to take those storyboard panels, which are very pretty, perfectly drawn, to sell the product and say, this is how we're going to do it, and this is the final result. And they have nothing to do with how the story will be narrated later, but it's something that helps us merchandising. And then graphic design or graphic research storyboard. Well, if we're going to do a character, we look at the different moods of that character. So we do a storyboard to see if it would work. What type of, how physical was the physical capabilities of that character is used as training. No, it won't appear in the film. And then the final storyboard for production, from which we're going to have enough information so that the background artists can do the background, so the layouts can do their own, so that the characters artists can do the characters, and then the storyboard for animatics, as I said before, where you mix the storyboard with dialogues and you do kind of a production. There's something that is happening lately, which is that given today's technology, Cinema Pro and others, the storyboard artists nowadays can allocate the amount of frames a panel is going to be on the screen for. So we've eliminated a step. Before, we used to have timer, a specific team, someone who's going to calculate the time and put a canon. Now, within the description of the work of a storyboard, it seems it's included, and that's done by the storyboard. And now I would like to open the room for questions you may have. Any questions? I can't believe there are no questions. Yes. Rather than about the storyboard, a question about the storyboard. And first of all, thank you very much for your presentation. I knew your professional career, but I was surprised when you showed all the films in which you had worked. And my question is about that. One of the films that I didn't know you had worked at was Catino Rugan, a great fan of the Moro Studios and the style. I like the art in the 50s and 60s. I guess that was one of your first works. I don't know if you remember a lot about that experience, but what was it like to work at the Moro Studios? Well, I have to go back many, many years. I think it was the first feature film I did. Catty, Caterpillar was a film, a Mexican production done by the Moro brothers. And the Moro studios at the time were quite small. They didn't have a lot of people. So I used to work in another studio here in Madrid called the Filman Studios, where we did productions for America, such as the Flintstones, Smurfs, for TV. So in Caterpillar, for Caterpillar, they gave us a few sequences, 20 minutes, so that we could do the animation in the studio. So it wasn't direct relationship. I wasn't working at the Moro Studios. I was working for the Moro Studios for this film. And the truth is that it was really interesting. First of all, because I'm a fan of José Luis Moro. I love the flow and the great capabilities of drawings. And to work at Caterpillar was like going into the spirit of working with Moro. And that flow, that the animation that we had made for TV series didn't have. It was more classic, more like Disney animation with those beautiful designs and the work of rather than Hanna-Barbera, which was head up, head down, Carol that way, Carol this way. So it was the first real animations I did for a feature film, so it was very special for me. And I also know you were the co-director of The Lost Links. I don't know if you can talk about that experience. Well, it was the beginning of trying to return to Spain after working abroad. The Missing Links. This was a small studio. That did different documentaries and things for trials, and it reproduced medical operations, etc. With Val Cecilia, and they wanted to do narrative, they wanted to tell a story, they wanted to do an animation story. So we got together and we decided that it was time to try and do an animation feature film. And The Missing Links is like included certain external factors that were combined to create something. Rocío Ayuso, our producer, a loyal producer, was lucky enough to get in contact with Antonio Banderas. And when we saw that we were doing, he said, let's go for it. And he became a partner at the studio. And that helped us in order to create that big studio we all wanted. To work in a project that in the end was quite fun, and it won a Goya Award. But the experience was very improvised. We didn't have the means, the people, we had nothing, but what we did have was a huge desire to make a feature film, and that's how it was created. Thank you very much.
Hola.
Hi. Where are you? Because I can't see you. Who's going to ask? Up here? Oh, okay, sorry. Hi. Thank you very much for the presentation. It was very interesting. Just a couple of questions about the current industry and the storyboard. You have said that there are the two sides, the storyboard based on the storyboard based on the story and the one based on the script. But I think there's a third way now, and I don't know if you have a comment about it, which is things like Midnight Gospel, where the voice is going in parallel to the image. So there's a parallel script about what is being shown. You know what I mean? So I don't know how you would classify that. Is there two storyboarders? Are the storyboarders being the script writers? No, I don't think so. I think that voice is written, and the storyboard artists are animating what the script is saying. I think that element that you're saying, that example, is a storyboard based on script. A storyboard based on situations like SquarePants SpongeBob is the perfect example of those types. Or the new Looney Tunes that they're doing, that they also follow the idea of the past genre, and the storyboards are the ones that are building the story with things that they make up, that then go through the director's hand to organize the flow of ideas and build it in a cinematographic manner with a beginning, a middle, and an end. Okay, and the other question is about the industry and work. Personally, I find that there's a lot of freelance work. From your experience, I don't know, maybe you worked more as a storyboarder specifically for the studios, hired by the studios or working as staff for, and now there's a lot of work in smaller things like advertising and not so many large productions. How can you head towards that, towards feature films? Well, the pandemic changed everything. Since the pandemic, well, anyone could work from home. And so the studios have realized that this formula works. And in fact, during the pandemic, in Hollywood, the only ones that had work in terms of cinematic production were animators. The animation industry continued working whilst the real image industry was confined at home. So working remotely from home offers to the studios many positive things. There are no goods and bads. There are no animation NGOs. This is pure business, okay? So suddenly, if a studio can have a team of storyboarders working in the studio with what that entails compared to working from home, well, that means the studios now have access to people working remotely from any country in the world. Therefore, they don't have to worry about work visas or any of that. And also, from a technological perspective, there are so many tools that allow you to work remotely that allow the director to review, to take notes, to write down things about your panels. And I think 80% of the work that's been done in the storyboard field in the industry at the moment is done not in-house. DreamWorks, for instance, is promoting people working from home rather than the studio. Disney, no. Disney still works in the studio with the storyboard exercises. But Disney TV, for instance, is disseminated on the web. There are different vendors, there are different studios that do the work for them. So from that perspective, I think that now it's easier than ever to get into the storyboard business, because also storyboard is part of our production phase that is very necessary. And the lines are blurred. The real image cinema now uses more storyboards than animation, in fact. There are films, the Marvel universe, for instance, has to be built with a strict storyboard because nothing's real. Because even the actors, Iron Man, all the superheroes, they are not actors. They combine the face of the actor and they put it in a body that's generated by CGI, by computer generated images where the background is not real. So you have to visualize that clearly. And the storyboard artist, I think, has many more opportunities to work than other specialists. There's a question at the, down there, I believe. Yes, hi. Thank you very much for your talk. I would like to ask, you said that now they expect a storyboard artist to also do the animatics. You've been working for many years and have a long experience. So have you seen changes on what's demanded from you? What has been the greatest change? And has there been a change in the quality or on what is expected from a professional storyboard artist? Yes, I think so. It has, I mean, things are more or less the same, but it has changed a lot. Before, the storyboard artist had to do his work only, create a storyboard, and that then went to the animatics department, that did the timing of the panels and built the animatics, and then that went to the workbook department, which analyzes each panel and decides what elements from production will go to that panel. So for instance, if there is a background, they'll decide, okay, so this background is going to be done on CGI, this one with multi-shots, how many levels of multi-shots are we going to have, etc. So there was a huge process of departments in order to create that final image. Now, from storyboard artists, well, we expect them to do the storyboard with sound, with the timing of the panels. They even expect us to do animation, the animatic storyboard. Well, it encourages movements to add After Effects or something so that they can get an idea, a clear idea of what they want to do. So the work of the storyboard artist is not just doing the panels and telling a story. No, it's also about being the technical director, trying to show to the team coming behind them what things can be done. And in the end, this is not just about the people behind it. It's just that this has to go through different managers that have never seen animatics in their life, and you need to explain it to them what is happening, why, rather than them saying, and why is this in black and white? So depending on the product, depending on the audiovisual work you're working for, there are many needs, different needs. And because you're talking about a communication product, but there's also production, the studio work in itself. So the larger the studio, the larger the pyramid, and more people you have to report to, and more people will have an opinion on things. So it's a set of factors that don't harm your mental state, and you think, well, I just want to do the storyboard and do what I know how to do, and the rest can be done by other team members. But you don't consider that you've only got 2 weeks to do the work, and then you have to do it in 8. Yeah, but there's a presentation tomorrow to the Netflix executives to know whether they're going to do a second season or not. So all those decisions on production from one place or the next will have an effect on the people doing the visual work, from storyboards to animation to the rest. Thank you. They are kind of bad news, but it is what it is. This is the world we live in. Okay. Hi. Where are you? Hi.
Thank you so much for this presentation. I actually now would like to work in this world. It's actually pushed me forward. I wanted to ask you, because I'm studying illustration, but I don't know how I could find my way into this world, finding a job in the sector. I don't know if illustration is good enough. Maybe this question is too open, but I wanted to know, how could we find a job that has to do with storyboarding? Well, obviously, if you're working on illustration, that means that your illustrations tell some sort of story. So when someone does illustration, what you do is you visualize a moment in time when something is happening, and your illustrations are basically a vignette in a storyboard, but a beautiful one in color with your style. But obviously the basis is already there, because you're telling a story, but not with a series of images, just with one image. So we're on the right track. And it's true that in storyboards, I mean, in order to get to the world of storyboards, that sort of skill, being able of telling a story in just one panel, is very, very important. So I always say that the people who want to work on storyboards, they have to work in the interval when you have one word per day, and you have to have an illustration that has to do with that word, because that's what you do in that storyboard. You're synthesizing a story in a panel, right? Now, if you mean what you have to do in order to step right into this world, you have to have a portfolio. You have to have a portfolio that shows your skill. skill set to tell a story, that shows your skills to tell sequentially an action. And in general, our portfolio to be a storyboard artist usually has 4 important elements. The first element would be to present a scene, an action scene, with a chase, whether it is 2 cars or one on a bike, another one on a horse, or one on a scooter and someone else driving a tanker. You just have to show that crazy pace of a chase with interesting angles, with a spatial understanding of what is happening with perspective and so on. So I'm not talking about 26 pages. I'm just talking about 2-3 pages for each of the things. That would be enough. The second example for storyboards would be to have a storyboard showing a dialogue taking place. 3 people sitting down at a coffee shop, for instance, having a talk, where you see that you know how to manage the 180 rule, that you know how to manage the transference from attention to one character from another. You have to show the shot and counter shot, for instance, and reverse shot. And the third example of a storyboard would be pantomime. So to narrate without a dialogue, just visually, a situation, a gag. Someone who finds a box on the floor and has to do something with it, whether he takes it, he doesn't take it, he opens it up or not. So things that happen, so that you know how to choose a pose that tell a story, and that there's a good action line and you're telling a story. And the fourth example would be an action scene that can be a daily thing, something that would happen on a daily basis. It doesn't have to be a kung fu fight. It could be, I don't know, your character who's going to the Starbucks in the corner to get his coffee, and things happen to them. And something that just allows you to show that you can talk about normal things by using normal angles, and that it has some fluidity to it. So I think that with those 4 examples, that would be more than enough. But what I was saying about the chase, it could be a fight, it could be, I don't know, so an exaggerated action, then it's pantomime, and then dialogue, and then normal action. If you want to make it even better, I would have a 5th example, which would be, how to call it, crazy camera. I don't know, it'd be an example such as super anime action, where the camera starts in the foreground and then it goes round and you have all sorts of actions. It's a camera that is moving with characters that are also moving, that helps you show that you are quite strong at showing that the character can be seen from different angles. So especially if you deal with TV animation and animation that is quite realistic, well, we have that sort of shot everywhere. I call it the camera of God, because it's a camera that flies all over the place. You don't even know where it comes from, where it's going, but it gives some dynamism to what you want to tell. And it's a bit more anime-like, or Endoime or America anime, I don't know, a hybrid. It's a hybrid between traditional storytelling and Japanese storytelling. Okay. Can I ask a last question? I'm guessing that to complete my training, I should have some basic training in cinematographic storytelling, right? Not just illustration. Yes, obviously. I mean, watching movies, going to the theater, just being aware of life around you works. And I don't just like illustration. I mean, it's my passion, my way of life. But I also love the cinema. I love the movies. I'm in love with movies, and I'm always watching movies. So I'm guessing that something sticks, doesn't it? Okay, thank you so much. I wanted to say, Raúl, that we have another question. We have another question here. So we run over a bit. I'm aware of the fact that you have other slides to show. So I just wanted to know if you want to continue with your talk for 5 more minutes. with your PowerPoint, or if you'd rather answer questions? I think if we continue with the questions, that'd be better. Yes, I think it's better to answer questions, because I just wanted to know if there was something that you did want to show. No, because I've gotten to illustrated panels of examples that I've already mentioned. So, okay, then we'll finish with the questions so that nobody is left without the opportunity of asking a question, although we run over the time that was given to this talk. Okay, thank you. Hi. Where are you? Oh, here. Okay, good. Now my question, since storyboards start so early in production, I wanted to know what's the relationship with character design and artistic direction. So to what extent do they feed off of each other? So how does the workflow work in that sense? Do they give you the character and then you and then you do your storyboard based on that, or is it the other way around? There is a big difference. There is a big difference between storyboard for movies and television. The storyboard for television, again, starts with that production Bible that we do at the beginning. So we already have the style of the storyboard, but you also explain what will be the background, what the characters are like. They're already designed. They're very well calculated, how many colors they're going to have. You have certain poses of the character and expressions for action and so on. So when you start a storyboard for television, they give you the whole pack with backgrounds that were created. They give you the pack with all the characters that have already been done, and you have the production Bible as well, where you have all of that information about how to do, how not to do your storyboard, and the keys, and on how to explain things. For instance, in this television series, we will not be using any general shots. It will only be close-ups and middle shots, and the close-ups are going to have all of the details. So if we are looking into the nose of the character, we will see the hairs inside that nose. So that's just so that you know how it's going to be, and everything has been done. Now, for feature films, you usually start with storyboards at the beginning when not everything has been completely defined. So you have to understand that in feature films, there is a pre-production phase or research phase, whatever you want to call it, where we're looking for references and we're looking for visual development, what is going to be done. So visual development artists are just shooting different ideas, style, art, colors, everything. So all of that is being built, and you're defining what that universe is going to be like, and you explain what you're going to be explaining during the feature film. So when you start working on the storyboard for a feature film, everything has been defined, but it hasn't really been defined. So when you look at Disney storyboards for any movie, you have a mental idea of the fact that it has to be something that will go to an art gallery, but no, that's not how it is. I mean, you do it quite quickly and roughly, and the characters are not well defined, or you define them as you go along, so that there is that certain feedback. I mean, when a character has been approved by the directors, then it goes back to the storyboard department so that they can fine-tune that character so that the character looks like what it should be looking like. And sometimes you design a sequence as a storyboard artist, and that sequence will dictate what the content will be, or what the background will look like. So there is a process, a collaboration process between some departments, and everything is quite seamless, and it's not as rigid as in the field of animation for television. So that is where we find the main difference between those two worlds. Hello. Hi. Thank you so much for this conference. My question has to do with your personal experience, especially with The Simpsons, because this is a series that I have been watching since I was very, very young, and I wanted to know what the experience was while working in such a big series, and what were the aspects of production that you worked in. Well, it was actually quite accidental, we could say. It's true that in my bucket list, I had written down work for The Simpsons at some point. So we were talking about the fact that in the series, there is a Bible, a production Bible that is perfect so that everyone knows exactly what are the shots going to be like and how you're going to deliver the story. But once a year they decide to just do without that Bible, and it's usually the Halloween episodes. They call it Treehouse of Horror, and that's when they do parodies of famous movies. They change their storytelling, and last year they did an episode which was anime style and Homer Simpson was anime. So at a certain point they decided to do a Bambi parody. That was 2-3 years ago. And they were looking for an animator who had worked for Disney and who could help them create that sequence. So they called me. And once again, how would I say no to that? I could not say no. So I worked with them for a month and we did that episode, but the production of The Simpsons is really, really quick. In a month, they create a whole episode. So everything is done so that everything can be done consecutively. And I worked on that episode. And then the thing is that when I finished that episode, they asked me to work for another and then for another. And I worked for them for 4 or 5 months at the studio. And the experience was actually very interesting because, once again, working for The Simpsons is it's a luxury. But then you discover that it's not that easy. That actually it seems, well, this television series, The Simpsons, it's going to be easy. No, 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 not at all. After 35 years, the studio is so very well greased. It's such a very well greased machinery. Everything is so well coded that an eyelash that is 1 millimeter longer than it should on March's eyelid is rejected because it cannot be accepted. So it was quite difficult, quite complicated, but I was at The Simpsons, so that was great. But it's true that I realized that it's a machine. Right now it's a machine. It's a perfectly oiled machine where everyone knows what they have to do, and there are people who have been working on that their whole lives. People who started on episode 1 and 35 years later, they're still there and they know the characters by heart. So it was interesting what I told you previously. So when I got there, I was an animator. I was just an animator. So my work was character layout, but since at Animatic they would give you a panel, a storyboard panel for every 8 frames, then it's like Animator here, like a key animator, because when that goes to Korea where they animate it, I think that Korean animators only have to copy my layouts and then include 1 to 2 drawings in between things. So it was very interesting that level. And it's The Simpsons, which are really, really cool. So that's the sort of thing. But in retrospect, I have to say that that was great in my case because I'm a bit hyperactive. So I worked 4 or 5 months with them. But then I thought, would I have lasted 35 years doing the same thing with the same characters all of my life? And I don't have a clear answer. But it was wonderful to work with that team of people. One of the things that I thought was quite shocking, was that I was working with modern technology, Toon Boom, Shock, all of these elements that we currently have that are wonderful, so that we can work anywhere in the world. And then suddenly, it's something that is happening to us all. You learn how to use software and you're good at it. And I knew how to use Toon Boom when I got to The Simpsons. The Toon Boom that they use is a Toon Boom that is so specialized for their production demands that it's like facing a new software. And I think that happens constantly. People who study in college, in animation schools, and they learn how to use Maya, then when you go to the trenches and you're working in the production with Maya, that Maya is so specialized and so adapted to the needs of the studio that you have to relearn the whole software again. So it's quite weird, it's strange. But as a summary, the experience was fantastic. Thank you, thank you, thank you so much, Raúl. Really, thank you. Big round of applause to this living legend. And next year, we will have to ask you to come back and talk to us for 3.5 hours, because we could be listening to you talk for a whole week. Now we're going to have a break. Would you mind if the people who are in the room come and talk to you and ask you questions? No, that's perfect. Okay, great. Yes, we'd better do it outside. So we are going to stop the streaming, because the next conference that will take place at 1, it's Imke Ferman's talk. She will talk about the change, how we can cause impact in the world of animation. It's a talk in English, and you have devices outside that you can grab so that you can listen to the translation. And it's only for the people in the room, because we will not be streaming that. And Raúl is here so that you can ask him questions if you wish to do so.